A very good evening to our viewers here in Globespan 24x7 as we bring you our Monday night program from New York, from Guyana, and of course, we broadcast around the world. We want to acknowledge those of our viewers who live in England. I know today they went through a heat wave and it's continuing tomorrow according to the forecast. Those who live in middle United States, they're going through also the same thing this week, and we pray that they will be safe, stay indoors, drink a lot of water, and be safe. The heat wave is only for a period. It will go on, but just be safe. We want to thank Noah Singh for making this platform available, and of course, Devin Bisu, our technical specialist. We also want to thank all our sponsors for still continuing to support this program as we bring you the issues in the news. And tonight, we have no stranger to us. We have a former Director of Budget in the Ministry of Finance and the former Minister of Finance in the last administration, Mr. Winston Jordan. Mr. Jordan, welcome to the program tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Sugrim, and thank you, Dr. Rose. Good night to you and good night to your viewers around the world.
Thank you, Dr. Rose, my co-host, welcome.
Thank you, Charles, and welcome, Mr. Minister Winston Jordan. Welcome to the program tonight.
Mr. Jordan, tonight we are talking of politics, government, and the current state of the economy and finance in general. And you being at one time the finance chief of Guyana, I want to start with that if you don't mind, because Dr. Rose will bring in the area of politics and government. I know if before you became minister, you were, as I said, the director of budget, and then you became minister. Had you not become minister, you would still be the director of budget. Maybe, might have been, still the director of budget. In retrospect, do you think it was a mistake to transition from the director of budget to the minister of finance?
Well, good night to the viewers once again, and thank you for starting out with that question. You probably didn't check my bio carefully. You would have noticed that I left the Ministry of Finance in the capacity as Director of Budget in 1994. I resigned, and then I went to the private sector. But I was called back to the ministry by one of the chief architects in the present government, and that would have been somewhere around June of 1995. So I rejoined the ministry as the advisor in budgeting, and I dovetail with the roles of director of budget because they didn't have a director of budget, I being the last one. So I went back there as an advisor in budgeting, but also did the work as director of budget. And I stayed there until 2007, from 1995 to 2007, when the government apparently had no more need for me and they did not renew my contract because I went back on contract. And so I left in 2007. And I rejoined the private sector. I worked for the Economist Intelligence Unit during that period. And I also did one of my favorite pastimes, which was to teach. Not at the university, but I taught secondary school students in mathematics, accounts, economics, stats.
Thanks for correcting me. Because when I left Guyana, I know you were the director of budget. And I thought you continued that position until you became minister. So thanks for that correction. But how was your stint as Minister of Finance? Did you, in your view, you had a good stint?
It was tough, but I could tell you one thing without bragging or boasting. I believe I might have been the only minister, I'm subject to correction, in whose portfolio, at the Ministry of Finance, who had actual experience in working in that ministry. You know, most of my life I worked at the Ministry of Finance. In fact, I was transferred from the State Planning Secretariat in 1985 to the Ministry of Finance. So I've been working at the Ministry of Finance since 1985. And I went through my background career before. So I had a lot of experience in the ministry. So I wasn't playing catch up when I was named minister, and there wasn't a steep learning curve as perhaps some of my other colleagues would have had, because they would not have been as comfortable or as au fait with the portfolio as I would have had because of my background and my experience in the ministry.
Yeah, without doubt, I believe what you just said is absolutely correct, that you were, in my view as well, the only person who had that vast experience in the Ministry of Finance before he became minister. Later on in the program, we'll want to get into your performance as minister, but before we get into that, Mr. Jordan, we want to talk about something that is very dear to Guyana right now, is the oil and gas contract. Were you involved in well, before I ask you that, do you think we have a good contract with the oil sector?
Well, you see, that question keeps being asked. This is what, 2022, roughly 7 years after the contract was signed. And I think we have to go back at the time the contract was signed and not use today's conditions with what existed 7 years ago. I think that is what has been happening all the time. When you go back 7 years ago, you have to understand where Guyana was 7 years ago when that contract was actually signed. We had just found oil. We were dealing with a major multinational company, because even though you had two more, Hess and CNOOC, I think essentially most people got to know Exxon, but they're not the only one who's there. You were dealing with a scenario where we were persistently being harassed by Venezuela to the point where they knew we could do nothing beyond diplomatic maneuvers about the harassment. In fact, prior to that, 2015, you had all kinds of maneuvers, including incursions into our sea space, incursions into our land space, incursions into our air space. They had even removed one or two ships and so forth, blew up one of our ships in the Cuyuni region and so on. So we were being terribly harassed by Venezuela. So I think one of the critical reasons why there was a seeming hurry to sign the contract was to get a major on board and on that sea shelf. And none better than someone who felt aggrieved with the way they were treated by Venezuela when their assets were nationalized or appropriated, and that was Exxon. As you know, Exxon took Venezuela, I believe, to as either ICSID or one of those arbitration panels, and I think they won a substantial sum, but they haven't been paid. So that was a strategic move to get a major on the shelf. And once you had a major on the shelf was the risk, it would have invited a number of other majors, as indeed has happened right now with a number of other majors, BP and all these ones who are showing tremendous interest. And the more majors you have on that shelf, and the more varied are they, whether they're coming from Brazil, France, Spain, Britain, wherever, Italy, the more they are there, I think is the more comfort, that safety valve, that comfort level for Guyana would have been raised. So that was a critical reason why there was that haste. Of course, there were a number of other secondary reasons, including, as my colleague had intimated, either on this program or somewhere else, that they had an issue with the economic and financial circumstance of the country at 2015, at around 2015. I think you may ask these questions before, but I can jump right into it and say, as you well know, Guyana was always known for one or two primary products. And at various times of our history, one of these primary products really carried the country. At one time it was bauxite, right? As you well know, we were well known for calcined bauxite, and I think we control about 90% of the market at one time. And we had very favorable prices for those. Bauxite earning a lot of money, was carrying this country. There was another time when sugar carried this country, as you well know, because we were getting a fantastic price out of the European Union, right? And then there are other times when rice, for example, although not carrying the country, enjoyed extremely favorable prices. Lots of people don't know, but under the Barnum regime, he was able to negotiate a fantastic price for rice, partly in exchange for oil at the time when oil prices were tremendous in the 1970s. We got a fantastic price out of Trinidad for rice. And still, there was a huge difference in terms of debt that built up between rice that we shipped and the price of the oil at that time, And then, of course, you had gold that every now and then may have a favorable price. But principally, bauxite and sugar were the ones that carry this economy. Okay. All of these products are on their last legs or are on weak, old legs. And in some cases, those legs, you cannot replace the knee with a plastic knee and so forth. In many cases, they are literally gone. And so you have to have replacement legs in place very quickly, lest the economy comes to a standstill. And in some respects, oil was like a godsend in that regard. So, yes, in hindsight in 2020, there are a number of things in the contract that could have been better negotiated and so forth. But having said that, you have in front of you a contract. Now you can run on two parallel tracks. On one track, you could seek to get the contract renegotiated. But the other parallel track that you must run on is that given what is in there, you have to ensure that you are not cheated, even within what you have signed up to get. And I think in that regard, we are not doing a very good job because 7 years after oil has been found, we don't have in place, I believe, not even maybe 10% of the legal, regulatory, human, and other factors in place to ensure that in terms of what is in the contract, we get every ounce of it, even as we move to attempt to get renegotiation.
And Mr. Jordan, I want to get into the Venezuelan thing in a minute, but what you just said there, we don't have the capacity, the human capacity to, or institutional capacity to oversee and manage our oil and gas. But the World Bank gave your government, when you were minister, $20 million US line of credit. You never took it up. Why?
No, that's not true, Mr. Sugrim. Absolutely not true. Why would I go $20 million and not take it up? Let me tell you something. The World Bank, after the no confidence motion of December 2018, the World Bank were playing games with us. But it was my resolute approach, and the government that I saw a resolute approach, that they eventually approved the loan. And I signed that loan on March the 29th, 2019. You will note that the World Bank is saying that the last disbursement requests came from this government, I think in October of 2020. But there were disbursement requests that came from the government of Guyana before. That is how I believe you got Market or Marcom or whatever the case, who did the audit for the 400 plus million pre-audit expense. I believe that is where they were paid. I believe the government might have used some of this, present government might have used some of the money to pay the lady out of Canada who did some work. I believe is on the third PR or one of those things. I think some money came from there. And we also had some issues with the World Bank in relation to a certain consultant who won the bid based on all the international tenders and so forth, and who got the stamp of the World Bank for us to go ahead, because you cannot, even when a consultant wins a bid, the World Bank has to approve the consultant, and they approved the consultant. And then somebody in one of these environmental agencies or so forth, I don't know whether it's local or international, raised objections to the particular consultant, suggesting that this consultant might have done work for Exxon, and at that stage, the World Bank decided to pull back. They decided to pull back, and they, in a sense, blame it on, suggesting, well, look, it's you ultimately, you, Guyana, who ultimately signed the contract, and therefore it is for you, Guyana, right, to rid yourself of this consultant.
Okay.
Of course, you know that could have caused huge problems, but I think ultimately the consultant decided to pull out. So you have a number of backroom goings on that you don't see up front. But it is not true to say that we didn't use the loan. We actually started using the loan.
But Mr. Jordan, the loan was basically to improve the institutional capacity of our country. TGMC, EPA, the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Energy. Any of those things happen in your view?
But my brother, you're speaking as if we were there, say 2-3 years after the loan was signed. The loan was signed in March. You have to give a period of effectiveness, which was about 3 to 6 months. What you call it, if you know anything about how these operations go, you have to give a period of about between 3 to 6 months when you are going to meet all the pre-requirements to effectiveness. Okay, so that will take you around, I don't know, October, November of 2019. Then you have to go to international contracts and so on. You're into 2020, into elections. You really feel that, honestly feel that we could have been doing what you expected to do more than we did.
Mr. Jordan, I got a picture, but let's get back to before Dr. Rose comes on. Yeah. Were you integrally involved in the contract negotiation?
No, I was not anywhere near contract negotiation for the for this 2015 contract. No, I was not involved at all.
Okay, but then, Mr. Jordan, in 2017, you and Minister Greenwich, Minister Trotman, Minister Patterson, and Minister Gaskin, you traveled to Houston. So you're not, these were not involved in the contract, but we all went to Houston. Why?
Yes, because after, I think around that same 2017, I believe it was, the president established what is called the Quintet Plus One, a group of ministers to engage Exxon in terms of the implementation. And that quintet comprised myself, David Patterson, Trotman, Dominic Gaskin, and the Minister of State, Joe Harmon. And the plus one was the legal advisor at the time, sorry, the economic advisor or the oil advisor at the time to President Granger, Mangold. That's the quintet plus one. And we went to Texas. Now, how Mr. Greenwich got him, because he was never part of the quintet, is because I believe something went wrong with Mr. Harmon. And so he dropped out. I don't know whether he got ill or something, but he dropped out at the last moment. And Greenwich joined the thing, but he was never part of the quintet.
Okay, so you mentioned Venezuela. Sorry, Dr. Rose, you're coming in a second. You mentioned Venezuela, but is it that Exxon had to deal with Venezuela before? Exxon knew Venezuela's players. Was Exxon playing chess and Guyana was playing draft? Because Exxon knew that based on the new dispensation, Venezuela will not come in with the Stabroek block that they were exploring in. So why did we went into this really, really poor contract?
I mean, what you were saying there is not even true, anywhere near true. I think Venezuela had shown and had started to show flex or muscle when Andarko, which was Texas based, I believe, was literally pulled out of the waters and held and towed to Maracaibo, I think it was. And it involved the American government getting in there to get the people released. So Venezuela was going to continue to flex her muscle until there was somebody there where she would have thought twice of doing. And that would have been an Exxon.
And that's what I'm saying, Mr. Greenwich, Mr. Jordan, sorry. That's what I'm saying, that Exxon played us because they knew that they had the strength and they went into this contract. But you know what? We just limited time. Dr. Rose.
No, but Mr. Sugrim, I don't want to jump off there. I don't want to jump off on that thing, you know. I just want to make this quick point. Look, in chess, in chess, you don't necessarily have two equal partners. You have one player with superior strategy over the other, and that is why you either have winners, right? When you come to draw, it's perhaps they had more or less the same. You can't at any one time suggest that we had the knowledge of the seabed, the knowledge of everything as Exxon did relative to Guyana. And that is why I made the point just now that 7 years afterwards, we seem in that same weak position. We seem in that same weak position. Mr. Ali said a couple of weeks ago that negotiating with Exxon, who was at his State House residence for something, either to sign a yellowtail or one of them. He said negotiating with Exxon was like negotiating with a superpower. And he is saying that 7 years after, and then after he would have signed for Lisa 2, PRO, and now Yellowtail. So that is the point I was making, that even after 7 years, even in the weak position that we were in 2015, we seem not to have been able to build any capacity 7 years after. That's all I'm making. That's the point I'm making.
Okay, Dr. Rose.
Thanks, Charles, and good evening once again to all our listeners, and good evening to you, Mr. Jordan. I first want to tell our listeners that you can tune into this program by going on YouTube and punching Globespan 24x7, and you'll have a live contact with the program as we speak. Tonight, we want to mention a person of the month that has done extraordinary things in Guyana, and she's no other than the Minister of Education, Ms. Pierre. Since taking over that ministry 2 years ago, I've been checking on what's going on there, and she has made tremendous progress in implementing programs to reduce school dropouts, reduce bullyism, and also to provide better learning and teaching for students. I want to give her to the ratings of people like Cedric Vernon-Nunes and Winifred Gaskin. Those are two prominent Ministers of Education who have done a lot for the country. And she is in that league right now, doing a lot to make sure that our students are well educated, especially in the hard sciences. She has also created a series of programs to help students achieve higher grades in classes. I will not go further, but tonight we salute Minister Pierre Manikan as our Person of the Month. Thanks. Now, Mr. Jordan, most people don't know you before bursting out to the scene in 2015 as the Minister of Finance. But I have a good knowledge of your background. You had a stellar character in finance, or experience in finance and economics and so forth, working in the Ministry of Finance as budget director, etc., etc. Can you give us a little background of yourself, like what school you attended, which university you went, and so forth? Not too long of a background.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to do that. I think most people would have read my background, but quickly I went to Campbell Government School as a primary school, and then from there, after common entrance, I went to Cummins Lad Secondary School and did my O-levels there. And from there, I joined Force Transport and Harbours Department, Civil Engineering.
O-levels, you talk about GC, General Certificate of Education, for those who don't know.
Yes, GC O-levels, right. So I left and I went to join Transport and Harbours Department. And at the same year, 1974, I joined the Government Technical Institute because I couldn't go to UG because I couldn't afford to go UG, and of course I come from a family of 8, and therefore I was the first to get into the post-secondary school education, and my mom was a housewife and my father was a joiner, and therefore they were looking forward to me going and earn. You know, after they would have invested in my education, they were looking to me to earn. So I went and worked with Transport and Harbours, and then I started evening classes at the Government Technical Institute in the Ordinary Diploma in Commerce. And the reason I did that is not that because I didn't have enough subjects, but it's because I did science. I was in the science stream at Cummins Lodge. And I figured I couldn't become an engineer because I didn't know anything about technical drawing. And so next best thing was to become a business person. So I went there to switch to business subjects. Then I left TNHG in October of '74 and went over to Customs and Excise. So while I was working at Customs, I was attending evening classes. And then in 1976, education was made free. And I applied and went into University of Guyana in 1976 to read for the undergraduate degree program in economics. And I continued with the afternoon classes at GTI, and I graduated with distinction in 1977. I graduated from UG in 1981 with distinction, and also earned the Vice Chancellor Special Award in the Faculty of Social Sciences. I won a Commonwealth Scholarship, and I went to University of Warwick in England in 1983, and I came back with a master's degree in economics. In 1990, I won a UNDP fellowship, and I went to the Harvard Institute of International Development at Harvard University, and there I did postgraduate work in budgeting and finance. And in 1992, I won a Hubert H. Humphrey Fellowship, and I went to Penn State University, where I did postgraduate work in budgeting and structural adjustment management. And those who know the Humphrey Fellowship would know that it afforded you lots of opportunities in the United States with city, local, and federal, and international organizations, internship, and so on. So I did a number of internships at IMF, some conferences at World Bank and other institutions. I came back to Guyana as the budget director, and I resigned in '94. I went back in 1995 as the advisor, and I stayed there, as I said, until 2007. And after then, as I said, I became a staff member of the Economist Intelligence Unit, where I reported on Guyana. And I also, as I said, did some private tutoring of students doing CAPE and CXC.
Good, very good. As I said, a stellar background. It shows that you were very, very brilliant in getting all those scholarships. You know, I'm very, very convinced that. Now, I want to turn to politics. Were you ever a member of any political party? It's not known if you're a member of any party.
No, I'm not a member of any. I'm not a member of any party. I'm not a member of any party. And as I tell this story all the time, that when I joined the cabinet of President Granger, I made it very clear I wasn't joining as any member of any party, and I wasn't going to join anybody's party. So sometimes during the sessions of cabinet, he will remind us that, you know, he had, I think it's 5 or 6 members in on the APNU plus AAFC, and then he had the Jordanite Party of 1. So he used to call me the Jordanite Party of 1, essentially. It used to be a standing joke in cabinet, but yes, I was not a member of any political party, and I wanted it to be so, because at the end of the day, it's not that he didn't value anybody else's advice and so on, but a lot of people knew I became a close confidant of President Granger, and I believe it came from a standpoint that in me, he got an independent view. It wasn't coming from a background of any party or any sort. He got an independent view, and he got an unvarnished view, so to speak. I want to believe that is why he...
Before joining the cabinet in 2015, were you associated or acquainted with Mr. Granger?
Yes, I actually, I worked a little bit writing articles for his magazine. It was called, I forget it now, but he used to be the author of a magazine that I think it came out monthly. And every so often he would ask me to do some economic articles for it. And I will do those articles, whether on the budget, the economy, and so on and so forth. And then unfortunately, he had to sell. He had to sell it. I think he sold it to Starbuck News. Yes, but after then, I didn't hear much about him we weren't in contact until one day in, I think it was 2015, January the 4th, when he came to my home and he asked me to assist in the campaign. And again, I suggested that, I didn't really want much to do with politics, but he asked me to do some background work, some background papers and so on, which I was comfortable in doing, but I didn't really want to get into the holy-boily of politics.
Okay, you mentioned cabinet. Carl Greenwich, he was the finance minister during Burnham's latter years in the early 80s or mid 80s, and then Hoyt's 7-year stint as president. He was the shadow finance minister in Parliament under David Granger leadership, opposition. So one expects that when you are a shadow person in a portfolio, if your government should win office, chances are you will most likely get that portfolio. And since he had a background in finance and was finance minister, everyone thought he was going to get a finance ministry. I was told Mr. Granger made what is called, I don't know what this means, a beeline, and he chose you. Were you surprised? Were you surprised?
I don't know about the beeline and so on. What I can tell you
I was told he made a beeline.
I don't know about any.
Ask Carl and give it to you. Were you surprised?
No. Listen. I don't know about any beeline. Let me give you a little insight, and this you can check. I will tell you after who you can check it with if you think that I'm making a story up. That when President Hoyt went to the 1997 elections, he had an interview with Cecil Griffith, who a Sunday, he had a Sunday program. He used to be interviewing people. And just before the elections, he had an interview with Cecil Griffith. And towards the end of the program, Cecil Griffith asked him whether he was going to bring in new people into his cabinet, and so forth. And he said, yes. He had it in mind. And so Cecil Griffith then probed him and said, well, can you name anybody? He said, of course, I can't name anybody. He had a jocular laugh and so on. He said, but what I can tell you that I have a well-known individual, earmarked for the finance ministry, and so forth. And he said, but that is the most he will say. And I can tell you today that well-known individual was me, because he had sent an emissary to my house earlier that year, asking me to come to see him at his house. And when I went there and so forth, he had certain conversations with me, and he asked me if I will join a new cabinet as a technocratic minister of finance, should he win the elections. That was in 1997. So this wasn't anything strange.
That was when?
1997.
No, he wasn't there in 97.
97, man. 1997. Hoyt.
Oh, Hoyt. Okay,
yes, there's more Hoyt. Yes.
Okay.
So in 2015, when I told you that then opposition leader Granger came to my house, he invited me to his house that was opposite the cultural center at the time. And there a strategic set of people used to meet. So when I joined, there were a number of other people that included Carl Greenwich, who used to meet frequently to discuss various matters pertaining to the upcoming elections, okay, and strategize and so forth. So I'm just going to name Greenwich alone because you mentioned Greenwich. So I was there, Greenwich was there, President was there, and a number of others, okay? That's all I'm going to say. So there was no beeline or any such thing, no.
I said I was told, I don't know.
Okay, well, I am giving you, as you said you want unvarnished thing, I give you unvarnished.
Okay, I accept. When you became the Minister of Finance, can you tell our viewers and tell the world how much money was in the Guyana Foreign Reserve bank account?
I can't. If you ask me that, I will just pick it up. I can't tell you how much was in the foreign reserves at this particular point in time. But I'm sure if you told me that this is the number in Guyana, then I will accept it. But I can't remember how much we had in reserves. What I could say, if you ask me what was the state of the economy, I can briefly indicate to you, as I remembered it at that time, what was the state of the economy.
Okay, when you left, how much money was in the reserve?
We had in the Bank of Guyana, I believe we had somewhere in the region of about 611 million US. Somewhere around that would have been in reserves at the Bank of Guyana.
Okay. Now, turn to politics. We know the 2020 elections, and I must ask you this. Did you think APNU won the elections or the PP won it?
Well, I can't tell you because I was never an integral part of the electoral machinery. So I've never been a part of the core group or the in-house group or so on. And therefore would not have seen any statement of polls or any such thing. So on the strength of that, I can't tell you whether we won or we lost or so on because I wasn't privy to any statements or any such thing.
Okay. Now let's turn to the economy. Do you think this government is doing a good job to develop the economy and improve the lives of the masses, given the tremendous rising cost of living at this moment?
Well, you actually answered coming towards the end because doing a good job consists of two sets of things. One, statistics. You have to have statistics when you're throwing out those statistics. And two, you have to see in terms of anecdotal evidence. And that comes from the human side, how people feel about their station in life, whether it has improved relative to a certain period in time. Okay? Under our stewardship, all the difficulties that we had in our government, because at the time when we came in 2015, the economy was in a decline. A lot of people you hear how they left a glorious economy and all this kind. This economy was in decline. I could give you the stats. Because I'm a statistician in my own right and so on, and I don't like to use anecdotal evidence. I have here, for example, that the growth rate under the previous government, Ramata's government, 2012 was 5.3%. Then in 2013 it went down to 5%. In 2014 it went down to 3.9%. So the economy had started its downfall. Okay, it had started downfall. In 2015 when we came in, growth was 3.1%. 2016 3.4%. 2017 3.1%. 2018 4.4%. And 2019, which is the last full year of us, 5.2%. Okay, so those are our growth rates. We had no inflation rate during that period that was higher than 2.3%. No inflation. In fact, at one year, we had actually deflation. We had a deflation. So we were having growth, consistent growth, in the context of low inflation, and we were transforming lives. Because during that period also, we came in and we met a minimum wage of $39,000. When we left, the minimum wage was $70,000. We were making all of those improvements in the context of low inflation and a growing economy. So when you want to judge somebody's performance, you have to judge it on those critical numbers: roads, health centers, education. In fact, we had the best result at CXC. Education, I believe, was 2018 or 2019. Okay, so those are the parameters one has to judge, and when you take those versus somebody else's, then you will be able to see it. Now you come to a scenario here over the last 2 years. What have you had? The government jumps in, it literally destroys the tax base, Okay, and now in a scenario where it has run out of options in an economy that is supposedly the fastest growing in the world. But that's a mass. The fastest growing economy in the world is a mass. In 2020, when the economy, I think, grew by 19 point something percent or something, the non-oil economy, which is what we're supposed to be looking at, because don't get carried away with the oil. We don't own the oil. All we own is a million barrels every 3-4 months or whatever. But we don't own the bulk of the oil. The non-oil economy, while we grew 19.9% in 2020, the non-oil economy grew negatively 6 point something percent. Negatively, or it's probably even more. 6.1%. Sorry, negative 7.3%. That was the growth of the non-oil economy in 2020. In 2021, when you had even more production of oil, the economy grew by 20.9%. Actually, let me go back again. In 2020, the economy grew 43.5%. But the non-oil economy declined by 7.3%. So it would have declined from 5.2% in 2019, growth of 5.2% in 2019, to a negative 7.3% in 2020, even though the overall growth of the economy was a positive 43.5%. In 2021, growth was 20.9%, and the non-oil economy was 6.1%. 6.1%. So you have to compare the 5.2 with the 6.1. This year, the economy is supposed to grow 57.8%, but the non-oil economy is supposedly expected to grow by 7 point something percent. But that will going to have its own challenges, because sugar, rice at the half year have performed dismally. So those figures, those non-oil figures, are going to have to be reviewed. Okay, when you look at the Bank of Guyana's reserves, because you kept asking me about reserves of the Bank of Guyana, and people got to know that the Bank of Guyana reserves are principally used for the payment of debt servicing, right? The central government's debt servicing, and the purchase of fuel, mainly for Guyana Power and Light. Okay, that's what their reserves are used for. Now and then, if there's shortage in the cambio market, they may intervene in that market and sell some to the market to make certain that you don't have too much of a depreciation in the rate. But they haven't been doing that of late because the market supposedly is flush with foreign currency. But when you look at the quarter report, because they haven't brought out the half year report as yet. When you look at the quarter report, the Bank of Guyana had lost significant reserves, equivalent to about $200 million between December of 2021 and April of 2022. 199 point something million, roughly 200 million reserves. And this is why I believe that the government on May the 11th went to the National Resource Fund and withdrew 200 million US, almost the identical sum that the central bank lost in reserves, 200 million US dollars. Because when they withdraw the 200 million from the Natural Resource Fund, they will have to deposit it in the consolidated fund. And to do that, they will sell that 200 million US to the Bank of Guyana. And the Bank of Guyana will credit the consolidated fund with the equivalent, which was, I believe, 43.6 billion Guyana dollars. So the Bank of Guyana reserves went up, and it's reflected in their May statement, where the end of May reserves was 730 something million US dollars, essentially. So the economy is not doing well, and on the export side, the economy is also not doing well. You look at the first quarter report, you will see that aside from oil, almost all the other products are not earning much of foreign currency, and that is putting a lot of pressure on the Bank of Guyana reserves.
Okay. Quickly, what are your thoughts on corruption?
On corruption?
Yes.
Well, I don't think my thoughts will be any different than most people. Corruption is a very corrosive aspect of development. It robs development generally. It's like a cancer. it doesn't respect good parts of the body and bad parts. It will eat any and every part. And if you don't nip corruption, nip it. Nip it means just clip it out, essentially. Like a cancer, it will grow back. And unfortunately, Guyana has had a bum rap where corruption is concerned. From time to time, we try to improve the regulatory and institutional environment. But who's going to police the policeman? And this is not literal policeman. In other words, then who's going to police the system that you put in place? And I think where that is concerned, the legs and the oversight bodies and so forth that are put in place to ensure corruption is minimized and so forth, I think invariably they either do not function or they do not function effectively.
Do you think the PP is corrupt?
I am not going to go out on any limb as such, because I do not practice this thing about labeling people without evidence. And until evidence is shown on a leg on which I could stand on, I don't want to go out and say PNC is corrupt, AFC is corrupt, PPP is corrupt, and so on. In many ways, the answer I'm probably giving you might say, well, they look like a technical argument and so on, but I tend to see myself mostly in terms of technocratic rather than political. And so if it's not a politically correct, if it's not a political answer, it is obvious reason.
Okay. You were in government, you're in cabinet during APNU's time. Yes. Did any one of APNU ministers breach the rule of law and was considered corrupt?
Well, as I said, I don't know. I don't know. The president never intimated to any cabinet member or so on that he was aware or he thinks that they were corrupt and so on. That is a question I believe, as you well know, it could only have been answered by the president, who would have had a panoramic view of all of his ministers and their goings on and so forth. I tend to, in my business, I tended to stick to my ministry and trying to manage my ministry in a professional manner. That is what I did as a minister.
Okay, Charles, over to you.
Minister Jordan, we'll take a short commercial break. When we come back, we'll continue the discussion.
Sure.
Travelspan has some very cheap fares for July and August to and from Guyana. Seats are limited, but call Travelspan today for these discounted low fares in July and August. In New York, call 718-845-0437. That's 718-845-0437. In Georgetown, call 227-1701. That's 227-1701. And in Berbice, call 337-4287. That's 337-4287. For discounted airfares to and from Guyana, call Travelspan today.
Are you missing homemade food, snacks, drinks, roti and curries, or have a busy schedule? Then get your favorite curries and roti delivered directly to your home with all from one supplier. Come order your duck, goat, or chicken, fully cooked and ready to eat with dal puri or bus up shut. We also now have chicken tikka masala or lamb vindaloo available with regular naan or garlic naan. Don't forget to add your solo, icy, coconut water, or Nestle drinks to these delicious meals. Select your choice, and load your box and let allfromonesupplier.com deliver directly to your home. All From One Supplier has you covered for all your food. Plus, if you need pepper sauce, curry powders, fish, meat, ghee, and so much more. We also have tasty pastries like pine tarts, cheese rolls, currants rolls, coconut rolls and so much more. Sales are ongoing every week, and your first order is 10% off once you apply the coupon code, Globespan 24x7. Log on to allfromonesupplier.com today and purchase. Allfromonesupplier.com is your one-stop shop for all West Indian items, and remember, it's free shipping to all U.S. states.
Welcome back to our audience, as we have with us the former Minister of Finance, Mr. Winston Jordan. Mr. Jordan, just before I continue, I want to go back quickly on the oil contract, and there's a lot of comments out there saying that when we signed the contract, Exxon gave us what is called a signing bonus of $18 million. It took you months to declare it to the public. First question is why? And two, where is the $18 million?
Well, let's answer the second question first. The $18 million was transferred. The $18 million plus the interest accumulated on it was transferred to the consolidated fund on January either the 18th or somewhere around the 18th of 2019. And this can be verified by the Accountant General, by the Bank of Guyana, and has also already been verified by the Auditor General. So I think people just barking up a tree that, that is as rotten as ever. They will fall down. So I hope that finally they can dismiss it, but they can go to the Auditor General's report and see he has actually said that the money plus the interest was transferred to the consolidated fund in January of 2019. Okay? Now back to the first question. I want your viewers to know up front, I played no role, zero role in the signing bonus. That's number one. Number two, if you go to a tape that is still on YouTube, I believe, of January the 11th, 2022, there was an interview between Greenwich, the Minister of Foreign Affairs under the Greenwich government, and Kiana Wilberg of Kaichor News. And that interview took place on Kaichor News Radio, okay? So I'm telling you, it took place on January 11th, 2022. So this year, and the tape is still on YouTube. I think it's still there, okay? And in that interview, Mr. Greenwich revealed a number of things that were news to me. I must admit to you, they were news to me. I didn't know this before, okay? But I am going to give the gist because some of it had to do with this signing bonus. And he said, first of all, there were three people who perhaps either were integrally involved or knew about the arrangements for the signing bonus, okay? But he only named himself. He said there was one other cabinet member that was involved, and that wasn't me. And one person who is not a cabinet member, whose name I subsequently found out, but I can't name right now, but well known. That's all I'm going to say. And what he said was that Exxon was approached for assistance with the Guyana-Venezuela controversy in the same way that CGX paid $10 million US for Guyana to take its case to UNCLOS, United Nations Conference on the Law of the Sea, in relation to the Guyana-Suriname situation, as you remembered, when Suriname sent gunboats into our territory, our waters, and removed a drilling rig from those waters. And CGX had hired that rig. And so they made available $10 million US. This was never told to the government and people of Guyana at that time. And the arrangements for the repayment of that $10 million US were never known. I think it's only the other day I heard a glimpse of what the 10 million, how the 10 million was being repaid and so on. I don't know how true is it, and I'm not going to say it. But what I'm telling you here are facts. That they, okay. So when this approach by apparently Greenwich and team was made to Exxon, it was made for assistance for the Guyana-Venezuela controversy. And he said on that tape that it was a bit unfortunate that the assistance that was given by Exxon was deemed to be a signing bonus, or was given the name signing bonus. And that is why I said on a program on that same Kaichor News, I believe is in 2021 or thereabout, that what I thought what Exxon gave to Guyana was a gift. and not a signing bonus. Because when you give a gift, when you give a requited gift, either you have to get something in return for that, or you can say how you want that gift to be spent. And in the reporting to the cabinet, it was indicated that the 18 million, 15 million was to be used for the Guyana-Venezuela controversy, payment of lawyers and so on, and 3 million was to be used for oil and gas related training of Guyanese. So that's how the 18 million was made up. That the 18 million was to be kept and be not under the control or the direction of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
And Mr. Jordan, what you're saying there, it giving the impression to our Guyanese who are listening to us now is that cabinet was very dysfunctional, apparently, because things were happening and cabinet was not involved, something as serious oil and gas. If they had invited Statoli from Suriname, they could have done a better negotiation. Look, Brazil signing bonuses $1 billion in some cases. So I'm surprised that our politicians, and I'm surprised also, Mr. Jordan, you as the Minister of Finance, you was not more integrally involved, because a lot of the clauses in the contract contravene our constitution with the tax clause and the excise duty and so on, and you are not a part of that. So it's really telling us that cabinet was very dysfunctional in negotiating one of the most important agreements that Guyana will ever have.
Well, no, but I think I won't use those terms, Mr. Sugrim, simply because, first of all, you don't expect the entire cabinet to go and negotiate. The president, who is the chairman and overall boss, okay, we are only his helpers.
No, I'm not saying that, Mr. Jordan. What I'm saying, you as the Minister of Finance should have been called upon to at least give your input into these important areas.
No, but what I'm saying to you is, ultimately, every cabinet member is the president's helper. That is what the Constitution says. Constitution recognizes the president in all these matters. The reason why I'm saying this, it is for the president to determine who is his team to do the negotiations. And if in his wisdom he determines the team must be X, Y, and Z, that does not include the Minister of Finance, it is his prerogative.
Okay, Mr. Jordan, we'll have to move on. Thank you. But I guess in the view of the Guyanese, maybe the president had no wisdom at that time, and that's a really terrible statement to make. But that's.
I think we could be made on a level of civility and so on.
I agree.
We don't need to say that. We don't need to say that.
I agree. I withdraw that statement. But Mr. Jordan, you mentioned when you took office, the Treasury had about $600 million in reserve. You said, is that correct?
No. You're getting mixed up between Treasury, which is a consolidated Ministry of Finance issue, and Bank of Guyana's foreign reserves.
Foreign reserves.
You asked me about Bank of Guyana foreign reserves,
and the reserve was about $600 million. You said.
Right. The Bank of Guyana's reserves.
And what was the position with the consolidated fund at that time, you know?
I can't remember. I could tell you when we came out of power in August the 2nd of 2020, the consolidated fund was in overdraft to the tune of $78 billion Guyana dollars. Okay, and that overdraft would have accumulated over the 5-year period.
Okay. All right. I want to get through. I'm glad you mentioned that. So when you left office, how much was the reserve at the Bank of Guyana? You came in with $600 million. How much is when you left office?
It was, I told you, it was the Bank of Guyana reserves when we left office was somewhere in the region of about 611 million US.
So the same thing you came in with, the same thing you left?
No. When you asked me when we came in, I told you I don't know the number. I said to you, I don't know the number. If you told me the number was so much, I say I will accept because you will get it from the bank.
Over the 5 years, over your 5 years from 2015 to 2020, and you mentioned the growth rate in 2020, was negative 7 point something.
The non-oil.
The non-oil, right. And I don't want to, I'm not political, I'm not supporting the PP or the PNC, but just to remember that 7 months of 2020, your government was in office. So you can't, we don't know who to blame for that negative growth for 2020 when both parties share that year in governance.
But when we came in May, we didn't disclaim the months that, we didn't disclaim the months.
But again, in 2020 was also the COVID, so I guess it's a different kettle of fish.
But I don't quite understand what you did. We didn't disclaim the months prior to us coming into office in May, because when we came into office in May, sugar was dead. Sugar was dead, and you don't hear us disclaiming that. So what I'm saying is, let us deal with the numbers as we see it, and not try to dissect. And so on. You know?
And we can get to the debate with sugar being dead, because I guess the people in charge of sugar, they didn't do a good job. If they had done good marketing, as you know, they might have done better. But what I'm going to try to say, Mr. Jordan, from 2015 to 2020, revenue, the current revenue was $1.2 trillion. What will you do with $1.23 trillion in those 5 years?
That's those. First of all, I think you have to look in terms of how we got those revenues, and then we will talk about what we did with it. We got those revenues not, contrary to all the noise and nonsense that has been talked about, not by increasing taxes. We got those revenue by efficiency in tax collection. And we did the things that the previous government didn't want to do. That is curtailing things like curtailing smuggling, things like bringing into the tax net a whole set of people who were outside of the tax net. And also ending concessions that were either inappropriate or were not consistent with the broader ethos of everybody being treated fairly and equally. I give you a typical example. In 2018, I believe it was, we acceded to a request by the Gold and Diamond Mines Association for an amnesty. But we said to them, listen, we can't give one sector alone amnesty. We're going to give everybody amnesty. So we gave an amnesty of 9 months. And the records will show that in that 9 months that we gave the amnesty, $12 billion in back taxes and arrears taxes were collected, of which $9 billion came from the gold sector. Arrears, of which $9 billion came from the gold sector. And that is what you will be seeing reflected in the revenue figures in the 5 years. We didn't increase any tax. We were responsible for reducing taxes.
Mr. Jordan, that is not
for reducing taxes in corporate income tax. We reduced corporate income tax from 30% to 25%. We reduced personal income tax from 30% to 27.5%. We increased thresholds, income tax thresholds. We increase salaries every single year. We increase subsidies, pensions, transfers, all of these different things. That is what we did with the 1-point-something trillion dollars. And it was evident in a society where people did not complain how they are complaining today. In a society where inflation was not what you were seeing today. And we like to blame supply chain and all these different things for the inflation we're seeing. Yes, part of it is due to that. But a lot of the inflation that we have in Guyana today is due to the mismanagement of the economy.
Okay, but I think you're leaving out a part, Mr. Jordan, is that you included VAT on many items that was not collecting VAT, and VAT revenue increased in 2015 from 35 billion to 2020. VAT revenue was for $50 billion, an increase of $17 billion.
Well, Mr. Sugrim, a number of factors would have been responsible. One factor is that, unlike the previous government, we changed the VAT Act to include public entities to pay VAT. Okay? The previous government, anything that was bought by a public entity, say the ministry, if you buy a vehicle, they paid no VAT. We changed the law that vehicle bought by the Ministry of Finance or the Ministry of Education and so on must pay VAT. The same VAT as the private sector would pay. So that would have enabled a significant rise in the VAT collections. So you have to know the story behind the numbers. That is one.
But don't forget, and what you said here is fine, but we just said you put in tax on the VAT on the pensioners with electricity and water that was Listen, my friend. As I said, I would deal only with the facts. You said we put VAT on water. We put VAT on water. But we did not put VAT on $1 of water. We put VAT kicked in. VAT kicked in after you would have consumed a certain level of water, well beyond the water consumption of the pensioner, the poor person, and so on, well beyond. Similarly with electricity, we didn't put VAT on $1 of electricity. We put VAT on electricity that you consumed in excess, I think it was 10,000 or 11,000 Guyana dollars. So you excellent.
Who paid anybody, let me you ask me the question and then let me just tell you, because it's my stewardship, I come here and I have to put it out there.
Yeah.
The VAT, if your bill, lots of people bills, poor people bills, were 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000. No VAT. No VAT. VAT kicked in after you would have consumed 10,000 Guyana dollars. We put VAT on domestic air transportation, but we excluded every resident of the interior area. Every resident was excluded from the payment of that VAT. So it sounds good as a political statement and a stumping statement to go out there and say, look, they put VAT on electricity, VAT on water, VAT on this and VAT on that. And in 2020, in the context of the COVID, the first things we did was to remove the VAT on electricity, water, domestic transportation. We removed that VAT in April of 2020.
Okay, excellent explanation. And I like that. I don't think Guyanese people understood it the way you just said it there. And I think that was good. Now let's talk about capital work. Over the 5 years, under your stewardship, we spent $333 billion on capital works. Of that, we got some capital revenue of $57 billion, and we had a surplus from the current account of $46 billion, but you borrowed $220 billion overall. Now, President Burnham implemented some very transformative projects in Guyana: Denver Harbor Bridge, Sioux Dike Highway, the MMA scheme, multilateral schools, the Canal Road, and so on. Name us a few transformational projects that the coalition did for 5 years, having spent $333 billion on capital works.
Well, first of all, I don't know what people call transformational projects. That term has been used now. It becomes an adjective that is being thrown about and so on. Listen, if you don't have water and you live in Sophia and you don't have water, and Sophia has maybe 15,000, 20,000 residents, and they don't have piped water, and if you were able to give the residents of Sophia piped water in that 5 years, that was a transformational project for the coalition government. It mightn't be a transformational project in your definition, but that was a transformation means transforming the lives of people. Go into the indigenous communities and see how the difference that we made in terms of what we did. Whether it was the internet, whether it was the roads. You look at second part of this country to get a roundabout, a fancy roundabout laid up with paved and all this kind of story. The point I'm making to you, if you were looking for a massive bridge across the Demerara River or something like that, I don't think you're going to find them, but you are going to find in every community in this country a project that for them transformed their lives. Okay. And that is the difference we need to make with our oil money. We don't want skyscrapers in this country. We don't want skyscrapers. What we want is to move the water from no place to at least the ground floor. What we want is to move the brown water and the rust water into something that you could drink back when me and you grew up, Charles. That we could go on the pipe name, the pipe outside and put behind and drink after we come from school. Mm-hmm. We want water that we can drink, not we have to continue buying from banks and all these different places. That is transforming people's lives. Transforming people's lives to be able to buy bora and pumpkin and dasheen and all these things that we produce right here.
Mr. Jordan,
so that they're getting decent salaries to do that. That is transforming lives. I'm not interested in skyscrapers.
We're looking at capital expenditure of $333 billion over the 5 years under your stewardship.
That's an average, that's an average of 60 billion every year. And under that capital, it might include transfers. Because it's capital expenditure, it will include transfers to the public corporations. And you must check and see how much we were giving to Gaisuku.
And what the Guyanese people don't know is that most of that money was borrowed funds, so we got to pay it back. When you left office, Mr. Jordan, there was an overdraft of over $100 billion.
The overdraft was 78 billion. I told you already, overdraft. This was look, I tell you already, let's deal with facts, okay?
But why was that an overdraft and not transferred to the consolidated fund, which was the law?
No, the overdraft was in the consol fund of 78 billion. The consolidated fund was overdrawn by $78 billion.
In addition to that, you had another overdraft outside of that was not in the consolidated fund?
Which overdraft? I don't know about any other overdraft.
Because I look at the Bank of Guyana report, and it says in 2020, there's 163 billion overdraft that was transferred to the consolidated funds, which include...
No, it wasn't transferred. Listen, you're getting confused. Let me tell you something. Hold on. I'm a bit of a finance, so I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know. That's why you're the finance man, that's why I asked you.
Listen, after the propaganda that was made about bankrupt Guyana and so on, the Honorable Member Annette Ferguson asked of the Minister of Finance, Ashley Singh, what was the overdraft on the consolidated fund at August the 2nd? At August the 2nd, 2020. And what was it at the end of December 2020?
And that is the figure I need to know too. We don't have that number.
His answers, I'm going to give the approximate because was that at August the 2nd, the overdraft was 78 point something billion.
Okay.
Okay, so we left 78 point something accumulated over a 5-year period. By the end of 2020, the overdraft had gone up to, I believe, $130 something billion. So in the short space of that 4-month period, there was a massive increase in the overdraft. And when you go to the half-year report of June 2021, it is said in there that the now government cleared an overdraft of $200 billion. So from 78 billion that we left at August 2nd, 2020, it had ballooned to $200 billion by June of 2021 when the government cleared the overdraft through the issue of debentures to the Bank of Guyana. I mean, so let us talk facts and figures. 78 over 5-year period force us another $122 billion in 8 months or 9 months, 6 and 4, let's say 10 months. Facts and figures. I'm not making these numbers up.
No, the Bank of Guyana report says that in 2020, the overdraft was $163 billion.
Well, I don't know.
2020.
At the end of 2020?
Yeah.
Well, then you have to, for the present government, they have to take out the difference between 78 billion at 2022, according to Dr. Singh, that we left at 2022, August, and the difference between 163 and 78 to the end. I don't know what numbers you're talking about with 163. I seem to remember only one something at the end of December 2020.
That make our domestic debt, Mr. Jordan, equal to our foreign debt. We have a foreign debt of 1.3 billion US, and we have a domestic debt of 1.3 billion US as well. Because
what report you are looking at? Because
the Bank of Guyana report. The Bank of Guyana report.
Of what year and what time period?
2020.
2020?
Yeah.
Because I know
our domestic debt was 264 billion Guyana dollars.
Right. And our foreign debt was 1.3 billion.
Right. It's 264 billion convert to 1.3 billion US. So we're in big trouble. Mr. Jordan.
I don't have those figures, you know. I went to the Bank of Guyana. I went to the Bank of Guyana report. The report of March. The report of March 20 of this year. And what I have here, just give me 1 second. What I have here in terms of the debt is that at the end of what I have here is that the debt at 2019, the debt at end of March 2019, foreign was 1.308 billion US dollars, and the local was 463 million US dollars, for a total public debt of 1.77 billion US dollars.
And I'm looking at 2020 report. It says total domestic debt is 264.9 billion, and foreign debt, I said, is 1.
You probably mean 264.9 million US.
No, this is Guyana dollars. The domestic debt is in Guyana dollars, not US dollars.
No, the domestic debt, and also the domestic debt is you have two tables that you can go to. One that has it in US dollars and one that you have it in Guyana dollars to make the comparison.
This says here, Mr. Jordan, Guyana dollars in millions. So it's 265.9 million, which is 265 billion Guyana dollars, which convert to 1.3
million. 265 million US.
265
million US.
And they're in millions. 265.9, which
million
is
US.
Million Guyana dollars.
Well, I don't know, because
anyway, one last thing before my close come on, and I know we're out of time. Mr. Jordan, when you went to office, our gold reserve was 101,000 ounces. When you left in 2020, there was not a pennyweight of gold.
Yes.
All of it was liquidated. Why?
Yes. Because, listen, look, first thing is, the gold board had some serious issues with gold and the holding of gold. Again, we come back to this issue about human capacity. We do not have the human capacity to know how to hedge gold and to hold gold. And our economy is way too small, way too small to be hedging gold. We're not United States with the Federal Reserve with all the gold and so on. So you cannot be holding gold when massive amounts of gold when the prices are falling. If the outlook for gold prices are good, you hold gold. But when the outlook and indeed the happenings of gold prices are falling, you don't hold gold. You liquidate as fast as possible to cut your losses. Because let me show you how gold operates. When you buy gold from a gold dealer today, It used to be at the London daily fix. So whatever is the price today at the London daily fix, you buy the gold at that rate from the miner. Minus a little whatever it is that the gold bowl takes.
Mr. Jordan,
so,
I know we can
go.
Hold
on. So if you buy gold today at 1,500 US and you hold in it, 6 months from now, gold prices tumble to 1,100 US. You have already lost $400 US per ounce.
Mr. Jordan, you only lose it if you, Mr. Jordan, you only lose it if you dispose of it. If you keep it, it's commodity, the price move. But in 2015, you sold 36,000 ounces.
You're not giving me a chance to answer.
No.
You're not giving me a chance. Listen, Mr. Sugrim.
But
reserves of the Bank of Guyana are composed of 4 or 5 components. So when you say the reserve of the Bank of Guyana is 611 million, it's not 611 million United States dollars. It has 4 or 5 components in it. It has SDR holdings. It has
I know,
cash,
we don't have time to go through all the details, Mr. Jordan.
No,
You're right.
Because you are making assumptions that don't have economic value.
Well, Mr. Jordan, the bottom line is the Guyanese realized that in 2014, at the end of 2014, you took office in 2015, there was 101,000 ounces of gold. When you left office, there was not even 1 ounce of gold left.
There is not a single ounce of gold today, Mr. Charles Sugrim. There is not a single ounce of gold in the kitty today.
Well, in the prior year, 2013, 2014, the previous government was buying and putting funds into it.
Sugrim, I am telling you today, there is not a single ounce of gold being held by the Bank of Guyana.
I didn't see the report yet, and I have to look at that report.
I'm not lying to you. I am saying to you, don't
I'm
make
sure
an
you.
issue of it. Don't make an issue of it simply because it is the Bank of Guyana and their board who would look at these matters and in consultation with the minister say, look, the outlook for gold doesn't look well. We should liquidate today. We can buy back again and so on. Today, there's no gold. Does that mean that they're mismanaging at Bank of Guyana? No. So stop making this an issue. It is not. It's a non-issue. It's a non-issue. We will buy back gold when the prices are reasonable, and we should be holding it. And we will sell it as quickly as possible to make a quick buck rather than making a loss. The gold board made billions of dollars in losses that had to be carried by the Treasury for a long time under the previous government. So please, don't make this an issue, right? The reserves of a central bank, are composed of 4 or 5 components. Gold is just one of them. And you have to be smart enough to know when to hedge the gold and when to sell it off. You have to be that smart enough to know.
I know
otherwise you'll be holding fool's gold because you losing all the time. It's like somebody keeping their money in the bank and inflation rising all the time, but they feel they're happy because they got $200,000 in the bank. They like to get $200,000, but the inflation rising all the time, the money can't buy $200,000 worth that it could have bought 2-3 years ago.
I know, Mr. Jordan, I know time is running out for us. Dr. Rose had a lot of questions for you, and I'm sorry we had to dominate this part of the segment.
No, I am not sorry. I am not sorry. I'm first and foremost an economist, and we could have gone through this whole
yeah,
night.
I know. We have to get you back to discuss some more stuff, but Dr. Rose, over to you.
Mr. Jordan, we are in the old stretch of this now. Let me get back to some maybe deeper questions in politics. Do you think that Mr. Granger was a good president?
Mr. Granger? I think Mr. Granger did a fairly decent job, given the circumstance under which he came to power, and given the difficulty of managing a coalition of 6 or 7 different people and the nature of that coalition. I will put this to you. I would not have wanted to be in President Granger's shoes. That is all I would suggest to you. I would not have wanted to be in his shoes to try to manage such a coalition.
And you think he did a good job?
I think he did a fair job of managing the coalition. As to whether it overall managed the economy and so on, that might be a different story. But in terms of trying to hold the coalition, because you know how hard it is. I know a few coalitions that lasted the entire period of the thing. You know, in Israel, every minute there's a problem with a coalition. So now I've got a problem sometimes with coalition. The coalition in Britain, I think, didn't last too long.
Belgium, all those countries. I know.
You know, so it is very difficult. People don't understand the nature of coalition. You know what somebody said to me, and they said it is attributed to Burnham. You know what they said is the definition of a coalition? A marriage of convenience made in hell. Okay. That is what somebody suggested to me, that it might have been Burnham who said so. But when you look and you observe and so on, I understand how such a definition could have come about.
On a scale of 1 to 10, what would you give Mr. Granger? Given 10 is the highest. These are because I would have to have a very set of criteria established and give it a mark and then get a composite at the end. And I don't have that, and I don't want to. I already gave an anecdotal thing, which is I said I think he did a fairly decent job. Okay. The scoring, you could leave to other people, but I don't have the parameters to assign the scores and to then say, this is the composite score, and on the basis of that, he did an excellent job, very good, good, fair, bad, very bad. No, I will leave my answer to what I gave you. What do you think of Dr. Ali's presidency? You think he's doing a good job?
I haven't made much of an assessment with his presidency. I think he's still young. So far, I think he's missing an opportunity to bring about a level of governance that will unite this country. I saw this missed opportunity when Jagdeo also was president. A lot of people don't remember that when Jagdeo was first made a minister, I think it's either a junior minister or a senior minister, it was none other than President Hoyt as opposition leader who had complimented him and who had indicated that because he wasn't part of what happened in the 60s and so on, he was going to bring that fresh perspective into the job, all right, and so forth. Years afterwards, we seem to be worse off when it comes to racism and ethnic politics and so on in this country. I think Ali is missing a golden opportunity that's been given again to a young person to really unite this person, and the level of dissatisfaction that is growing in Guyana, and particularly in the post-elections of 2020, doesn't bode well for a country that is the fastest growing country in the world.
Okay. Now, what do you think the opposition is doing a good job in Parliament?
I said only a couple of weeks ago that the opposition needs to up its game if it wants to really be an opposition that is taking, that is respected and takes advantage of all the opportunities that are being created. I believe there's so much more that can be done, notwithstanding its present limitations. I believe that there's so much more that can be done, and a lot more that lies, a lot of tools that lie within the armory of the opposition. I believe they're not exploiting. The COVID is not as bad as in 2020, because under COVID you might have been shielded from not doing certain things. Now that is not there. I believe the strategy and the thinking of the opposition got to be both changed and upped in a way that will give them the kind of respect that they should command for somebody that owns 49-point-something% as declared by the GCOM of the electorate.
Given the scope and importance of the Ministry of Finance, you being the minister, do you think it was unwise for President Granger not to make you the opposition member of Parliament in charge of finance in Parliament?
I think you don't know the underlying thing. told Mr. Granger that that was it. That when he approached me on the 4th of January 2015, I indicated to him I was available for this term. I was going to see through this term. I wasn't guaranteeing any second term. When he was putting together his team for the opposition, I made it very clear to him that that was it for me. I was finished more or less with active politics. So it's not that he excluded me. He wanted me to go back into Parliament, but I was insistent, and my family was very insistent that I not take part in politics any longer.
If I'm not mistaken, and I stand corrected on this here, because I've been doing the research, but I'm not getting the answers. You have been the first ex-cabinet minister that have been charged in Guyana. Without explaining to jeopardize your case, what were you charged for?
I am on a trumped-up charge of misconduct in public office for well, it's on the thing for allegedly signing over property of WARF that supposedly worth $5 billion for 100,000 Guyana dollars or US dollars or something. I mean, look, I could use some adjectives, but I am going to just hold my peace and my lawyers, and don't let my lawyers start cringing. But I am going to leave it exactly like that, okay? It was designed to malign my character, a character that I had built up over the years. I eschewed various other positions, especially at the hand of President Hoyt, because when I am married to a Jamaican national who was a Jamaican diplomat when I married her, and brought her to this country in 1988. 1988. Those who know about this country in 1988 will tell you what this country was in 1988. No water, no light. And I'm living in the same house. I am living in the same house that I was living in 1988 in South Wineville, a joint-up house, okay? What they call a prefab house. I'm living in a prefab house in South Wineville, in the same house. And I brought her here in 1988 to mosquitoes, brown water, no light, 25 hours in a day, not 24, 25 hours, no light. All of that I brought her, and she's persevered. But in 1989, I said I had enough of this. And we were ready to migrate with her, taking her back to Jamaica, and I going with her and taking up another job. When Mr. Hoyt called me and said, listen, he heard I want to leave. I was at Ministry of Finance at that time. And there's a story with me and Mr. Hoyt back from when I graduated from UG, which is we don't have time for. But he called me and he said, I heard you want to leave. And he can't hold me back or whatever you want. But he is trying to do something to change the economy. And he don't have too many people around. And at that time, Carl Greenwich was the Minister of Finance. He didn't have too many people around. And he's asking me to just remain for a short while to help put together the program. And the rest is history. The team that was available to put together that program was Carl Greenwich, Winston Jordan, Clyde Rupchan, the now dead Clyde Rupchan, and from the Bank of Guyana, we had the now dead Pat Matthews. Okay? That team. And so I've been involved in fund programs integrally involved in fund programs since that time. And I've been stuck in Guyana. But I've endured all of that and eschewed higher positions, and to be tarnished, for my reputation to be tarnished with a trumped-up charge is the ultimate in unkindness.
Mr. Jordan, we'll have to get you back in this program. sometime in the future, if you're willing to, please
Yes,
come back.
I am willing. I was invited to this program, I believe, in late 2020 or early 2021, and I had declined at that time. I didn't think the time was propitious at that time, but when Dr. Rose signaled to me, he could tell you I readily agreed, and I'm prepared to come back.
Thank you
this
for
is what
coming
I
on.
do. I'm no longer in politics, so, and whatever I've said tonight, let me make this very clear, does not represent the view of the APNU, any member of the APNU, any member of the AFC, or the APNU-AFC coalition. These are my views. Okay, so
Thank you very much.
I don't want anybody thinking that I'm speaking for the coalition or any party in the coalition. I am just giving my views.
Excellent point. Is there anything else in closing? Because we're out of time. I know we're out of time, but quickly.
Though I just want to thank you for the opportunity for being on this program. All my answers are frank. I've been very frank and to the point. I have no difficulty in coming back and spending however long we want, because for me, it will help in clearing up a lot of misconception, a lot of propaganda, and so forth, and we can go toe-to-toe, one-on-one, and on any other issues. But please, I would rather deal with the facts than any propagandistic.
Precisely, and we want to thank you for spending an evening with us, Mr. Jordan. Dr. Rose, anything in closing?
Yes, I go back to what I've been advocating over the past year and a half, is that, and Mr. Jordan, you will agree with me, that the time has come for us to improve the retirement age from 55 to at least 62 years old.
Well, I don't know whether the time has come. To be quite frank, I think the thing needs more study. We got quite a large number of young people. If you notice right now, if the unemployment is very high, and to further extend the retirement age will be a disservice to those young people at a time when we're hearing about more jobs being created, but that is not necessarily so. What I could say, though, that we could still retire the people at 55, but we could have a cadet service, or don't name a cadet service, or a post-retirement service where everybody could go and register, and your skill set can be put on contract in a certain area, but you won't be online and stopping another person from coming up. You see what I mean? So you could be in that professional skill set, and you can be tapped. You can be tapped to go into these
things. 92% of countries that have a retirement age at
all right, Doc, continue. We can run out of time.
I'm calling for improved salaries and wages for teachers, police officers.
I agree.
Nurses, public service, everybody's to $150,000 a month because of cost of living and because of the services they're providing. And I'm also calling for improved internet services. And please, I'm asking public servants to answer their phones. Public servants do not answer phones. They do not answer landline phones. I'm asking them, please answer your phones. Thank you.
All right, we have come to program time. Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Thank you, Dr. Rose. Thank you to our audience out there. Thank you, Noah, and to Devin. Until the next time, good night. God bless our great country of Guyana.
Thank you very much.